Hi, this is David with entry number 654, 53. I'm in this wonderful park, as you can see. There's a woman there raking leaves. She's done a very good job, as you can see. These bags are all full of leaves. I've recorded around here before, over in that amphitheater in the corner. After I ate an ice cream cone one time. It was a much hotter day, but yeah, it's another wondrous fall day here. It's currently about 60 degrees, maybe 62 degrees Fahrenheit. It's pretty good, really good actually. I'm wearing pants, I'm wearing a shirt, I'm wearing a jacket. How could it be any better? Well, it could be snowing, right? There was just something I turned on the camera for. Oh, that's right. A couple things. The first thing I want to talk about today is this strange thing about superstition and superstition here in Korea. We'd like to go. I think they would like to say they're not superstitious people. That they're some kind, that they're modern, that they're westernized or whatever. Maybe not westernized, but they're modernized, and they won't believe in superstition. But they do have a fair amount of superstition here. That is a holdover from olden times, I suppose, where superstition comes from. A lot of people don't know it, but this country used to be a sort of shaman culture, not unlike kind of like the Hmong style, where there was a shaman or a witch doctor, and there was a heavy belief in spirits and the spiritual world. To a large extent that's gone, but they do have a fair amount of superstition that still is permeating the culture. One of the biggest things that you'll find is the kind of the fear of the color red, and not the sense of wearing red or eating red things or drinking red things, but in the sense of names, actually. It's very bad luck, or at least very poor taste, to write people's names in the color red. Now, I would say that kids born after 2000 probably don't care about this anymore, but for a lot of the people I suppose 1980, 1990, it's a pretty big deal to have someone write their name in red. It's like a black mark or a bad omen for this to be done. And it's a very fascinating thing to see because it's so innocuous to us, but it does carry a very heavy weight to a lot of Koreans. The second thing is, so back on Veterans Day last week, they do a thing in Korea and Japan that celebrates these little chocolate-covered biscuit candy or cookies, and it's essentially what they consider their Valentine's Day. So it's a pretty big deal. It's a couple's day. People are all out, enjoying the fall weather, and I went out early just to get air, and I had a lesson that day, and I was just sitting on a bench, and normally people just sit on this big bench that can hold probably about 50 people, and I was just sitting there, and typically when I sit somewhere, maybe if it's a small bench like this one, I don't have someone sit next to me, but if it's I've sat on that bench before, and people would sit next to me and stuff, because there's a lot of people in this park, excuse me, and on that day, no one sat next to me. It was quite funny. It was this big bench. All these people were walking around, probably looking to get a load off, take a load off. And yet no one chose to sit next to me on this big bench. I've seen it before when a foreigner's drunk, or just being a foreigner, people kind of will avoid them. But on that day, I was pretty certain that no one was sitting next to me because I was alone, and that was kind of like bad luck, I suppose. I found it humorous at least. Um, so yeah, they do have some superstition here still, but it is measured, I would say. Um, I don't know what's happening, but there's a big group of older men coming in who I will have to talk quieter. Um, Overall, things are good. The second thing I wanted to talk about is this kind of idea, or maybe better said, kind of concept of awareness, um, saliency, novelty, which I've talked about before, I know. But where does our sense of saliency, which is another way of saying how are we made aware of things? How are things? Imagine our consciousness as kind of like a bubble, and a bubble has like a little skin around it. How are things able to permeate that skin and have some kind of, how do we know to attribute our attention to those things? And, a lot of things in most people's lives get ignored because they aren't worth being noticed. Currently I'm hearing people sawing metal, but if I was to live in this park and that happened every day, eventually, a new person would come in and go like, oh, what's that sawing? Why is someone sawing metal? And I would go, what's that? I don't even hear anything. There's no sawing metal. And that's just things, that's called habituation. We're learning to tune out certain things. And that happens with actions, colors, senses, everything. And there's a point where it becomes not salient anymore because we get used to it. The habituation works in tandem with the saliency, where things will lose saliency as they become less and less novel. Novelty is the idea of kind of it being new, or something being fresh. And, I'm seeing a lot of people forgetting that critical thinking isn't something that we do naturally. Critical thinking is something that people who have the time and the ability do. But I would say most people, even people who aren't necessarily busybodies or like CEOs, do a lot, because it is not a natural process for us to spend calories on things that aren't kind of inherently important to our survival. We have a certain amount of energy, like I've said before, a certain amount of energy and a certain amount of expendable energy that we will allow ourselves to use on kind of frivolous, quote-unquote, things. But and critical thinking, I think, is a very frivolous thing in terms of our survival. But if we look around, we take a little bit of time to actually think about things, you can improve your life so much. You can improve the quality of your life so much. And I get that that's not really important to a lot of people, but it should be, because you can learn a whole hell of a lot from just being more observant and thinking about things, or thinking why. It's quite easy to not do this. It's quite easy to ignore little things that go on around us. Hopefully you've noticed that there's been people, old guys, walking back and forth in this video. How many times did they go back and forth, if I ask you right now? How many times did the woman go back and forth? Did you notice the man in the baby blue sweater? These are things that we kind of lose attention for. And I'm not saying everyone has to do it. I'm not saying that it's like obviously it's not a vital function that we pay attention to these small things or think or ask why constantly. But I will say that if you do these things, if you do choose to incorporate a little bit of critical thinking in your life, things become a lot more obvious. And when things are obvious, they're obvious. Well, anyway, this has gone on for too long, far too long. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll talk with you soon. Bye.